What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic.
I'm Jammin.
And we have yet another album review for you, and another one that we were anticipating because this band is just absolutely insane. And honestly, may have got more insane, but in a totally different insane way than I thought they would get insane. Anyway, we are going to go over the latest offering from Full of Hell, Coagulated Bliss. This comes out also on the 26th of April on Closed Casket Activities. This band formed in 2009 in both Maryland and Pennsylvania. This is their sixth full length overall, though this band has tons of EPs, demos, splits, collaborations. Like, they are very busy. We went over their last one, Garden of Burning Apparitions, and it was absolutely as nuts as we expected it. I mean, I've been a fan probably since Trumpeting Ecstasy. That was the first album I really got into. And for those that don't know, this is just a hostile blend of grind, noise, power violence, a little bit of death metal, and honestly, a couple of, slightly newer elements on this one.
Yeah, I've been into them for a while, probably back around Weeping Choir or so. Yeah, we went over not only the last one, but then the split they did with Primitive Man as well, and it was just
horrifying.
Yeah, terribly horrifying, and that's music I like, and so here we are. Now, I've come to expect over the years from this band a certain level of feral, noisy disembowelment, so to speak, from this band. Just crazy shit fits of noise and grind and violence. This is about as unhinged as it usually gets for this band, but this was not necessarily that. There's still that in here, but it's not the focal point.
Yeah, this kind of immediately caught us off guard because of the production is notably different. Like, this sounds different than I would say any of their albums previous. This was mixed by Taylor Young of Apparition, which is a nasty band in itself. And I was kind of just blown away at how crisp this sounds. Like, it still sounds gritty, but everything is way more separated than before. Like, the last album pretty much was just like getting hit in the face with like bricks being hurled at you in terms of like a sonic assault. Like, it is dense, heavy, noisy, abrasive as hell. The album had the audio texture of sandpaper, but that is kind of what you want from this band just in terms of like their scathing sound. This kind of uses what I would call a different grain of sandpaper here. It's still very noisy, caustic, heavy, but there is like a polish on here, and there's a clarity on this album that I don't think I've heard in previous albums.
It's still noisy, but it's a different kind of noise, too. Like, it's not a full-on abrasive whirlwind of the most abrasive things you could think of. It doesn't sound as horrifying as it usually does within that atmosphere either.
Yeah, I mean, it starts off grindy and nasty as hell with Half-Life Changelings and Doors to Mental Agony, which I feel like this band has definitely opened quite a few of those doors in their career. They're fast-paced, lots of blast beats and twisting, angular riffs. Like, there's a lot of, like, Pig Destroyer energy to them. And this is what I kind of expect from the band, albeit I think there's some interesting, dare I say, melodies in there. There's a lot of more intricate guitar work, or at least more intricate guitar work that you can make out now.
The guitar tone is actually a little bit thicker in most spots, chuggy, if you will, which is not something I came to expect from this band either. Songs like Gaping Dust and Gelding at Man both have these awesome off-chord dissonant chugs, but they're more melodic and broken up and very catchy.
Yeah, and I mean, catchy was, again, like, something I really wasn't expecting, but I mean, there are some like legit hooky riffs on here and very different kinds of hooks than I was expecting. Like, the last song, Malformed Ligature, might be the most melodic track on there, and I mean, honestly, it sounds like early Cave In and early Converge, specifically like Jane Doe and Until Your Heart Stops. There's a big hardcore energy to it, but those weird angular riffs and that sort of like spazzy, transition happy sort of like style of metalcore / hardcore. And it also features Jacob Bannon, which is probably another reason why it sounds kind of like Converge. But even in the drum work, like, the drum work almost sounds like Ben Kohler's drum work, where you get those like spaced out little almost fills that are blast beats and then turnovers and, his crazy D beats and such.
And then a lot of the accented like flams that he does. Like, every time he hits the snare, he doesn't just hit it with one stick, he hits it with two. You get a lot of that and a lot of like the boom, ka, toms, ka, like stuff like that to make the groove more fat.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of a big thing in hardcore, and hardcore really does show up on here too, like transmuting chemical burns. It comes in with, just a flat out hardcore stomp and riff. Like it's kind of got that bouncy hardcore pep. Like it has a grindcore fit kind of in the middle of the song, but it returns to that. It's like a flat out like mosher. Like, this is where the frontman, in this case would be Dylan, just does one of these and you follow the command and then you punch your buddy. But hardcore is still something that I kind of expected on here. This album gets a little bit different, at least in terms of what I have listened to from Full of Hell. Like I know they are definitely a blender of just different things, like, again, all the different musical styles, plus like nails, broken glass, batteries, a G.I. Joe action figure, whatever they can throw in there and just destroy the blender. But I wasn't expecting a flat-out Godflesh worship song. Fractured Bonds to Mecca is flat out a Godflesh song. You have an industrial drum pattern, like it's an electronic kit, or at least like a just flat out industrial drum loop on there. It's slow, murky, the bass and the sludgy riffs kind of drive it, and the riffs themselves are simple, but they're kind of like elastic and stringy and weird and bendy. And then you have an absolutely feral vocal performance from Dylan on top of that, which that describes the entire vocal performance. Like he is just losing it on here. Yep. But the alternating screams and growls on there, like the whole vibe of the song is just dark and dingy, like you're trapped in the basement of an old factory, and there's definitely rats. There's tons of rats in there, I'm sure of it.
Oh, rats.
That is a Godflesh reference to like rats, though, by the way.
And then you have the song Bleeding Horizon. Speaking of sludge, Bleeding Horizon is just a straight stoner sludge song. Great job at building tension, for sure. Like from the very beginning, you get this warbled, off-chord, like out-of-tune strum.
I noticed that.
Yep. And then you get bass feedback, and then this feedback just builds into straight, like, I don't know, yob?
I mean, I got a bit of yob, but this is also like the longest song on the album. And honestly, probably the longest song I've seen them do since Trumpeting Ecstasy. Like they have at least one song on there that I think is over 6 minutes. But the fact that instead of everything coming at you at 1,000,000 miles an hour like the rest of this, because this album is loaded with just bonkers transitions and rapid fire riffing and blast beats, this song is like deliberately monotonous and kind of just slowly builds in the atmosphere, and it just turns into this lumbering creature of a song with horrific vocals, a droning riff that just hits. Like, honestly, it kind of reminded me more of Thou than anything I have heard from Full of Hell.
And I have not listened to Thou, but I need to listen to Thou.
You do. But the song is built on, like, doing one thing repeatedly over sections. Like, it's kind of a cool sort of monotony. But it does close with a little bit of, like, flash and flavor. Like, the riffs get a little bit more intricate. Honestly, I'd say that last breakdown on that song is kind of an I Hate God breakdown. Like, the rhythms are a little bit kind of swingy for a second.
They're catchy.
Yeah. Like, that was the thing I really wasn't expecting, is, like, all over this album, there are moments where, despite all the scraping, nasty riffs and just squawky guitars and feral vocals, there are some, like, legit cool riffy hooks on here. And a degree of, like, technical playing on here that is pretty marvelous at times. Vacuous Dose, it goes through just intense shifts all the time. And it is a very short, very bombastic track, but you go from like punk riffs to like more intricate crawling riffs. There's a really cool blast pattern that's broken up at the beginning. So there's a lot of cool dynamics packed into this one short song. And I like that about this band. Like, this album is only 25 minutes long, but there are tons of things going on, and it's very condensed and very explosive for the most part, except for like maybe a couple of tracks in here. But I like the fact that there are lots of memorable moments peppered in at these, just absolutely disgusting shit fits of musical violence.
And most of those catchy moments come from the melody, which again is weird. In both Schizoid Rupture and Vacuous Dose, Both of those have Mastodon melodies in them. Straight up. It just reminds me of something that you would find on Remission.
And they make good use of their guests, too. Like, not only does Jacob Bannon fit in entirely too well on Malformed Ligature, like, honestly, if it was just him on vocals on there, I would say, yeah, this is a Converge song. Like, no doubt. Like, yeah, it's a little bit grindier, but it's a Converge song. But Gasping Dust features Ross Dolan and probably the most distorted vocal I've heard from him. Like, at no point does it sound like his delivery in Immolation at all. It sounds like very staticky. There's more reverb on it, and he's alternating between Dylan's just hyper tense anguish screams.
Yeah, that call and response that they do is actually really cool. But that's probably, I don't know, I want to say the heaviest song easily on the record. That's straight up deathgrind.
I don't know, Schizoid Ruptured has some absolutely like twisted, distorted vocals on there. And I don't know, like that one's got some like death metal vibes to it, like brutal death metal. Like maybe it's like an uncredited appearance from Will Romer or something like that, because they are deep, they are distorted.
There is a really deep growl in that song, yeah.
And like it just kind of adds to the just absolute ferocity of this album. But interestingly enough, like this album isn't always about being ferocious. Like this is probably one of their most ambitious, and I don't know, I feel like it's plotted out more than maybe some previous albums. Like there's a really interesting pace to it. It's broken up with some very different songs. And I'll even say that some of their elements are kind of dialed back a little bit. Like this is definitely still grindy and blasty, and there's definitely moments of like power violence heaviness, but I feel like those have been kind of scaled back ever so slightly to make room for some other elements on there. And the biggest element that I think is scaled back is noise. And I'll be honest, like their noisy side isn't my favorite side. In fact, I'll say like the noisy tracks on some of their previous albums, I skip them. I don't like them. Like I get it. Like you want to create an atmosphere that is horrifying, and you're probably playing things in like certain decibel levels that instill fear, anxiety. Well, I don't want to hear those. I'm not a fan, but they do utilize noise, I think, more effectively here in minimal doses because they use it in transition between tracks more.
See, now I do like the noisy stuff. I like the noisy, horrifying, unsettling things. And while a part of me misses that a little bit in this album, I'm not complaining either, because the noise that they do use,
it's still effective.
It's still effective, but it's not as horrifying. It creates a bigger soundscape. Like on Fractured Bonds to Mecca, the last, like, I don't know, 30 seconds of that song sounds like somebody knocking on a bunch of doors in a bunch of different rooms all at once. And it's still percussive, so it's kind of cool. I think there's even a doorbell or a ding or something in there, but that was just kind of an interesting take.
I mean, it's probably like the least surprising thing in here because this album closes with a saxophone. I didn't expect that one.
The isolated sax melody, and towards the end, it sounds like it's being played by a grade schooler.
Yeah, like everything's like a little bit off in this album. Like, you know, some of the melodies, like those opening clean melodies on Bleeding Horizon, like that guitar's out of tune.
It is.
You can tell.
It's endearing.
But yeah, it's kind of part of it. Like, you know, this album doesn't want you to get comfortable at any point. And I totally get it, and it kind of works for this. In terms of negatives on here, man, honestly, I don't have a lot. Like, this is, like, probably, again, like their most ambitious album. And while it does scale back some of the elements that I do like namely, like, a lot more of the grindcore, it does add some cool elements that I really wasn't expecting. Like, I didn't anticipate comparing this to, like, early Cave-In or, you know, Godflesh at all.
Or Mastodon or Burnt by the Sun.
Yeah. Maybe more Burnt by the Sun than any of those. But yeah, like there's more to this one. All the pieces, I think, are pretty much in place. Like, again, I love Dylan's vocal performance. I think the riff work is way more like out front, and it's not blended in with like a ton of noise. It's not going so fast and it's not so muddy you can't make out everything. In fact, this is probably the clearest I think this band has ever sounded.
Yeah, it's weird. I don't really have any complaints either. I mean, you know, like I said, a piece of me misses the chaotic, horrifying noise. But as bands continue to release albums, you know, you want some progression. You want something different because you want to be able to separate it apart from other albums. And this album, I think, stands on its own as something I just genuinely wasn't expecting. I was waiting to get, my brain melted and to be frightened of things lurking around corners, and just I was ready to be unsettled. I came here with that purpose. So overall, I'm going to give this 4 stars. I dug it. It's very entertaining. From song to song, the switches that happen, like going from Transmuting Chemical Bonds, which is a nuts song, into Godflesh worship. And then ending up in a bog somewhere with sludge in your pockets. Like, I didn't see that coming either. It's catchy. The production on it really, I think, helps it out a lot. Helps a lot of these songs stand out. I wasn't expecting to be able to hear little nuances that I don't think you'd normally get to hear either with a noise-packed album. Like, being able to hear pattern changes, and the drums just sound punishing on this. But they almost sound like Kurt Ballou mixed them. Almost. He didn't, but they almost sound like that. Yeah, it was just entertaining, and if you're a fan of Full of Hell, you're probably still going to like this, but there are some changes in here that you probably didn't see coming. If you're a fan of Cave In and Burnt by the Sun and Godflesh, Mastodon, Converge, yeah, if you're a fan of any of that stuff, check this out. It's a great listen.
I'm going to go with a 4 as well. Honestly, I think this is going to be a standout in their discography overall, at least as far as their full lengths. And part of me thinks that this album could be somewhat divisive with their old fans, because I do sense like a bit of a change here. Like, this is honestly the first album cover I've seen that's been in full color. But trust me, it's weirder than hell. Like, I went through the booklet, nothing makes sense. It's just weird, painted and pixelated madness. But, I mean, that's kind of this band in a way. I think the clearer production definitely helps showcase a lot of the intricacies in their sound, because before, like, again, that caustic wall of mud and static, there's stuff kind of hidden in all those layers. All of it is just very straight out in your face. Again, the noisy elements are kind of dialed back, as are some of the grindy elements, but I think there's a lot more going on here, and that allows a lot of these tracks to stand out. Like, there are tracks that sound nothing like other tracks in here, and that's pretty damn awesome. And they didn't have to throw in like a long noise track just to irritate me or make me think my skin's on fire.
Right, yeah, that was another thing. There's not really any filler on here. There's no just noise track. There's always something music going on.
Yeah, and musically I think they're really pushing into some interesting territory. You know, the addition of a bit of melody, the Godflesh track on here is awesome, and Bleeding Horizon, man, that is just a dismal, ugly, sludgy, disgusting song that, again, sounds like it crawled out of a swamp in Louisiana. They found like an interesting balance in terms of like remaining feral as hell, but also maybe kind of putting themselves on like a little bit of a leash. Like, it's got a lot of slack. They're still going everywhere, but they don't go like as crazy as they have before, or at least as crazy in terms of just noise and being like just musically schizophrenic. Like, this is a little bit more on the focus side, and I mean, honestly, it delivers a very memorable album, and not memorable in the sense that, yeah, I feel like I have been beaten by a gang with baseball bats after listening to this. Like, this still sounds violent. But
all my appendages are still intact.
Yeah. But, yeah, if you're a big fan, again, of Full of Hell, I mean, this is still 100% Full of Hell. And Pig Destroyer, again, Godflesh, early Cave In, Converge, kind of across the board, honestly. Bands like Botch, too. Yeah, like, it's kind of got that sort of, like, spazzy energy. Check this out. Honestly, this could become a new favorite of mine from this band.
Yeah.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you are new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We are also on Patreon. If you'd like to help us out there, there's a link down below to thrallsmetal.com. Our Patreon link is there. It is also on our channel up in the banner in the bottom right-hand corner. But if you're looking for Thralls Metal stuff, you have to go to thrallsmetal.com. We have shirts, both old and new. The old shirts are discounted, provided we have your size, and we even have some hats. So if you're looking for any of that stuff, click the link down below.
And surely, last but not least, thank you guys. We genuinely appreciate you. For those of you continuing to tune in, and even some new faces, welcome aboard. Welcome to the Thralls family. You guys are the ones that make it family. We appreciate you. Tons of content coming your way. Album reviews, discography rankings. We're about to do a bunch of live shows because MDF is coming, and I can't wait for that.
Woo!
Yep, woo. We appreciate you. Thank you, Nick. Thank him again.
Yeah, you guys absolutely roll. And yeah, a whole bunch of stuff on the horizon. We will definitely keep you alerted for that. And, well, of course, one more big thank you because you guys are flat out amazing.
Thank you.
And we will catch you later.